The sitting is resumed. Speakers, please. Senator Reverend Canon Dr. Rogers.
Good morning, Mr. President and colleagues. And I wish to thank you very much for recognizing me and affording me the opportunity to speak to the appropriations bill on this occasion. I, first of all, wish to commend our nation, Barbados, for its decades of political stability and national development, which are the hallmark of a mature and serious democracy. I also, as I mentioned, wish to express the honor of being able to participate in this debate for yet another year as we continue to chart a path of development for our people. However, I dare say, and I hope you'll allow me to indulge me for a few moments, to say it would be naive of us if we did not acknowledge that this budget and this debate is being conducted in an environment where the geopolitical landscape is at an inflection point. Though it had been noticed for some time on the horizon by those of us who have a keen eye for these things, we are now in an era where we are witnessing in real time a polar shift in the geopolitical climate. I had the opportunity, sir, to speak to this recently as I was asked at the last moment, because the speaker at the last moment was not available, I was asked to speak by the Barbados Commonwealth Society to deliver a message on Commonwealth Day, which would have been the 10th of March this year. And on that occasion, I had the opportunity to reflect on the 76 years in which the modern Commonwealth has existed. And I noted that since it was formed in 1949 in the wake of World War II, there's been a geopolitical shift wherein the Axis powers that were the forces, the enemy forces at that time, those being Germany, Italy, and Japan, who were defeated by the Allied forces, of which the UK and her dominions, which was then known as the Commonwealth, formed the most formidable force along with its allies, the US and others. And I made the point that 76 years down the road, the Axis powers, which had embraced fascism, all now practice a style of governance which is more in line with what the Allied forces would have fought for. But on the flip side, one of the main characters in the Allied forces now purports an ideology which is in many ways indistinguishable from the fascism which they sought to eradicate. I've highlighted this because for us in Barbados and this region, it is imperative that we take note of what is happening in the geopolitical sphere. It is imperative that we pull together as one to navigate the uncertain and treacherous waters that will be international relations in the years to come. We must present ourselves as a people with a right to be here, not as some would want us to present ourselves as beggars who must be eternally grateful for the bread that falls from our master's table. As one of our own cultural icons in this region told us, we've been trodden on the winepress much too long. It's time to rebel. But we can't allow ourselves to be divided as a region. As the mighty Chalkless would have said in his 1985 Calypso, all we have is just sea, water, and sand. He said on that occasion in one stanza, some of them Caribbean leaders to get Mr. Reagan's dollar, would denounce their CARICOM friends and neighbors. We are now in such a time. We are dealing with no Ronald Reagan, though. It's a time of small men, petty men, but with a lot of power in their hands. And therefore, we must be very careful how we negotiate and conduct ourselves as a region. But that being said, we cannot afford to cower. We cannot afford to cower to this power or this ideology that it purports. In fact, just as the ideology of the movement in Germany of 1930s and 40s had to be opposed, this one must be vehemently opposed. If we give an inch, they will take the whole yard, because expansionism is one of their modes of operation. And I use that within the context in which Paul Keynes Douglas said that Boopsie answered the question in the Queen's Show. Said Boopsie was asked the question, how many feet are in the yard? And she said, it depends on how many people are in the yard. They will take the whole yard. This was the mistake that Europe made in the 1930s and 40s. We cannot afford to make this mistake now. Of course, it is dangerous, and it will be painful. But the pursuit of freedom and justice has never been easy, because oppressors do not readily relinquish such things. And as I said, we need not feel as though we owe any loyalty to anyone, because let us remember how these nations became recognized as great in the world post-1945. It was the US and the UK who had a sales pitch to the United Nations that they could be the world police, that they will look after peace in the world. And it was bought into through trust, because people bought into a sense of universal altruism, that there will be somehow a sense of disinterested righteousness from these nations. Of course, over the years, we began to see the sordid reality. A pivotal moment being when blacks were suffering at the brunt of apartheid in South Africa. In 1986, the leader of the United States, Ronald Reagan, the leader of Great Britain, Margaret Thatcher, and the Chancellor of Germany, Helmut Kohl, went to South Africa and refused to impose sanctions on the brutal and destructive regime there, prompting the Archbishop of Cape Town, Desmond Tutu, to say to his people, they have said to the 25 million blacks in South Africa that we are dispensable. They will not help us. And as far as I'm concerned, the West can go to hell. It may be that time for us. We are facing similar threats. To denounce our Caribbean neighbor and friend, Cuba, we may not want to use the language Desmond Tutu used, even though I thought it was good language, but we can use the language of Jesus. In St. Luke's Gospel, chapter 13, we're told that the Pharisees came to Jesus and said, boy, run, Herod wants to kill you. And Jesus told them, go and tell that fox that I have work to do. It is time for us to go and tell that fox that you do not own us. We're not for sale. You know, sir, we did not beg for their protection. We did not beg for their help. They presented themselves as the one who will uphold this ideology of altruism in the world. We did not beg them. We trusted them. We trusted them. The world trusted the pitch of universal altruism. If they have now shifted to a toxic form of nationalism and extremism, so be it. If they had told us before, I'm sure that we here in Barbados would have sorted out ourselves, sir. We could have developed our own protection. For one, I know we would not have gotten rid of the Trident. We'd have done some work and modified it. And we would have got something to patrol us. And it is rumored that one leader of Barbados once entertained thoughts of getting a fighter jet. And we had at least one, and we got the Concorde there. We could put in a little something and do something. Our boys here were making pipe guns for the longest while. We would have fixed up the harp gun and done something. We could. Of course, I'm being ridiculous. But on a serious note, I will say this to the right-thinking citizens of the land of the free and the home of the brave. Do not make the mistake that Germany made. Do not normalize it. Do not make it seem as though it's okay. Germany did that. And as a result, they lost half a century of the 20th century, being a powerful nation. The question for them is if they're willing to lose half a century of the 21st century, being a powerful nation. And I know they know how to fix it. They've done it throughout the world. They can fix it. But just given that as a segue into my reflection on our appropriations bill, for it is within that geopolitical context that we must reflect on this budget. All the numbers we have here now may mean nothing in the next few weeks. We must focus on this budget not necessarily on figures, but in seeking to find what is the ideological focus for us as a people. Not only do we want our nation to go, but where the current state of affairs compel us to go. Resilience must be our watchword. We must seek to develop the most driven and productive workforce possible. We must seek to produce a nation of people who are not only conscious of who they are, but are comfortable, confident, and proud of who they are. It means that national development cannot be measured only in numbers and figures or opulence, but in the resolve of the people to build a strong and cohesive society. I dare say, through no fault of any administration, because as I said last year, it is very easy to fall into a mold and just continue doing that thing. It is something that we do within the Christian context as well. It is very easy to create a set of things to do and tick the boxes every day and say that I'm doing a great job for Jesus. But there comes a time when we must step back and assess whether we're really doing something that is constructive or not. And so, as I said last year, and we saw it here again, different administrations will come and blame the one before for not doing this in housing and not doing this in that. Understand that. But what is our ideological basis? It is under this goal of building a cohesive society is under threat for us. It is under threat because, for the most part, as I said, through no fault of our own, we have defined success and development primarily in figures and opulence. The people of Judah once made that mistake in their own lives as well. When the people returned from exile in Babylon around the year 538 BC, it took them about 18 to 20 years to rebuild their temple and so on. As a result of that, many people lost hope, and they began doing the things that they felt they needed to do to gain a way in the society. So they married into the people of the lands, they forsook God, they didn't build a temple, they built their houses, and once they had big houses, they thought everything went well. And then the prophet Haggai had to speak to them. And this is what he said in chapter 1, verses 5 and 6 of his text. Give careful thought to your ways. You have planted much, but harvested little. You eat, but you never have enough. You drink, but you never have your fill. You put on clothes, but are not warm. You earn wages, only to put them into a purse with holes. In and out. And the question for us here in Barbados is, have we become that people? Have we become that people? I'll speak to 3 ministries that I believe are linked in some way along this line of which I'm speaking. The Ministry of Education, Technological and Vocational Training, which is the largest part of our national budget, with 98 million going to the University of the West Indies and just about 375 million in other places. We have been talking about education transformation, and I know that that is in the works. And last year I would have spoken to this matter and appealed for continuous assessment as an alternative to the common entrance if we wanted to do something about it. But whatever we do, we must make sure that when we're finished, while we're trying to level the playing field, we do not hold back the genius amongst us. I don't know, well, I know you would have, sir, but I'm always impressed when I speak to a little child from Harrison College or Queens College. Well, St. Michael's Foundation, and you go down. But those little children, for the most part, are bright. I mean, what you call bright. Real bright. These children can sit down and have a conversation. An 11 and 12-year-old can sit down and have a conversation with you about world affairs and all kinds of things. Because they're widely read. And I don't want us to suppress that while we try to fix the other side. And in fixing the other side, sir, I happen to be on the board of one of the schools. I love my children, where children come in with 10% or less in the common entrance exam. And that tells us we have a problem in primary school, a serious problem in primary school. Because if a child gets to 11 or 12 and can't read, or something is wrong. And not all of them are special needs children. And that has been exacerbated by the COVID-19 pandemic, where we have a serious education gap among some of our children. Because all the laptops we provided and so on, if you live in a house where around you the block is next door, and the guy is blasting music every day, and you gotta look after the little brother or sister, and there's no food in the house to get anything, you have a problem. So a lot of our children develop serious learning gaps during that period. And I've been speaking to my board, and I had a little chat in the ear of the new minister recently. And one of the things I believe we will need to do in the interim while we get educational reform together, don't force our children out of school. A child with 10% cannot do the first form curriculum as a child with 100% somewhere. they need an extra year in first form. They need some time. We need to invest in remedial teachers, people who are trained to teach English and math and the other thing, who can communicate with those children. Because as I said, many of them are not special needs. It's just that they have learning gaps because something was missing somewhere. And they can develop, but they need time. And it cannot be in the interest of national development to fast-track children who need help out of school. They need some time to grasp the concepts. They may not get them at the same rate as the other child, but that doesn't mean they cannot. And we have to embrace our children in that way. And so I really want to encourage us, in the interim, while we pull everything together with the education reform, let's consider this. I know there was a time when some schools had a lower first, because I spoke to a lady who went to one of the schools I mentioned earlier, and they had a lower first. And that's where they learned etiquette, how to walk with a book on their heads and so on, and other social graces. All I'm appealing for is a little time for my children to be able to, at their own pace, grasp the concepts. You remember a time when we had composite schools, sir? When children who were not ready yet for the exam were given an extra time to fix themselves. These children need, they can develop, they can produce, but we need the extra space. And so I'm appealing in the interim for a lower first. And several schools can benefit from it. I know we have the upper fifth, but I believe that down here is where you need the help first, that lower first area. And we need to invest in remedial teachers who can help them. Because, sir, what invariably happens is that you're forcing these children to work at the pace of their peers in other places who are way ahead of them. And they get frustrated. It's frustrating. As I told you before, sir, when I came to Barbados towards the end of third form, many, many years ago, I was not going to do math in fourth form. There was no way I was touching that. Because in St. Kitts, you didn't have to do math to get in sixth form. And I know I wasn't touching that one because I couldn't do 2 strokes in math. But I came here and met a teacher. She was Miss Weeks then. She got married after. And all of a sudden, math looked like an easy subject. And I was able to develop and pass it at CXC and so on. I wouldn't say what happened after that, but I was able to pass it. And these children can do that. But it's frustrating when we're trying to fast track them and push them through at the same pace as others, knowing that if I get 10% in 11 plus, there's no way I can work at the pace of a child who got 90. So create a little space for me. Create a little space for me and get parents on board so that they understand it's nothing punitive. This is just for us to make sure that your child can be the best that he or she can possibly be in this society. That's what we need. Because, sir, when you do not do that, and children get frustrated, they start counting themselves, I cannot make this, so I have to get by however I can get by, and this might just be my lot. I need to do X, Y, or Z. You know what happens, sir? They fall prey to the people who tell them, man, come, man, don't mind them and that school thing. I could get you to work for more money than them. You make more money than them? And I taught in a system where fellas used to tell me, sir, boy, the man working hard, but what you making in a month, I can make in a week. That's the reality out there. Yes, but where does it lead them? As one colleague of mine used to say, fellas, there can only be so many drug pushers, you know. Somebody got to get rid of somebody. Small group. And so I've said that to say, sir, that a lot of our young children get hooked. Hooked in lifestyles that are detrimental to their development. Get hooked on substances that are destructive to their lives. And I'm going back to my pet peeve, my pet area in the Ministry of Agriculture. The Barbados Medicinal Cannabis Licensing Authority. The Barbados Medicinal Cannabis Licensing Authority just signed a memorandum of understanding with M-Money, according to an article in Business Barbados was November 12, 2024. And one of the laments at the end of that article was this, sir. As the entire cannabis community continues to wait for the United States to end its protectionist position on the federal level, the Barbados Medicinal Cannabis Licensing Authority will continue to pursue all viable alternatives to end this financial embargo. Sir, if you are waiting for the Americans to sign a farm bill to get your medicinal cannabis licensing authority on the way, like Bob Marley, don't wait in vain. You have an administration that is now signing executive orders to stop men from wearing skinny pants, skinny jeans, and you expect them to sign a farm bill to legalize marijuana at the federal level? And last year, it was during Lent, we had this debate, and it's Lent again. And in Lent, one of the things that we focus on is repentance, and in the Greek, metanoia, change of mind. Ain't nothing wrong with changing your mind. The main strains used in the US for their cannabis industry, which they trade and sell all around the world, are things like Charlotte Web. Charlotte's Web has 20% CBD and 0.5 THC. All you gotta do is come down below the level. Come down below, just define cannabis as something below that level and you're gone clear. You don't need the thing with the heavy THC in it. What are you doing? The only thing that does is help cancer patients and so on with nausea and so on. You don't have to worry about that. There are other drugs for that. It's been 6 years down now. And every year, millions of dollars are pumped into this industry. And what has happened, sir, is because we have not been forceful enough in defining what cannabis we're talking about. You got the ordinary man on the street saying, but the government says, all right, all cannabis is good. And you listen to the call-in programs these days, the poor old people can't leave their house. You go to a little karaoke, somebody there smoking the thing. You can't breathe. Anywhere you go. Funerals, I had a funeral one day, sir, and the fellas started up smoking their thing on the graveside, and I played back. Listen, none of this here. All right, Pastor. But then the men light about 100 incense sticks. But that's a different thing. I was playing my little steel pan one night down by my hall there, and I smelled this thing choking me. I reached through the window and tell the fellas, ease up on the thing down there. They say, what you mean, Rev, the innocents? I said, no, I use incense in church. I the innocents. But that's what you're getting. You see, because everybody feels now the government says it's okay, Bennett. That's not really what you want to say. That's not really what you want to say. All we need to do is change give a definition of what we mean as cannabis. Anything below 0.3% THC, and you're gone clear. You don't have to worry about anything. It's legal at the federal level. The banks will accept it. Metanoia. If we fail to do that, and we continue to give the impression that there's this permissiveness in our society, it'll continue to affect our children. And when it affects our children, it'll affect our health care. It'll affect our productivity. I had a study from 2022, sir, of, I lost my study now, yeah. I had a study from 2022. It's called Barbados Drug Information Network Report 2022, commissioned by the National Council on Substance Abuse. And the key findings are, well, persons aged 5 and up participate in the programs. 85 students were admitted to Edna Nichols. 82% of those were male. Of that number of students, 36% of them tested positive for marijuana use or had trace amounts in their systems. The students testing positive for marijuana were 13 to 15 years old. It's in 2022. The psychiatric hospital, 38% persons admitted in 2022 received drug-related treatment, 90% of them being males between 21 and 45. Marijuana was the most common primary drug amongst the day participants. Thrive Center. Marijuana was the primary substance for focus. The Substance Abuse Foundation, Burden House and Marine House. Crack cocaine was the most common drug, with alcohol and marijuana following after. Center for Counseling, Addiction and Support Alternatives. Marijuana was the most common primary drug, distantly followed by alcohol. The National Council on Substance Abuse. 50 persons received counseling, 48 of which were drug-related, majority being males 20 years or younger. Marijuana was the most common drug, distantly followed by alcohol and tobacco. We have a problem in our society. We have a problem in our society, and I believe that all these three areas are linked in some way. If we are going to weather the storms of the geopolitical crisis that we're facing, we need a strong society. We need a strong society, and so it means that we have to look at what is happening in education. We need to look at what is happening that is affecting the health of our young people. We need to look at what is happening. I haven't mentioned violence or anything, but we know that only too well. So at the time when we need to be most cohesive as a society, there are lots of problems under the surface that we have to deal with. And I dare say we must deal with them with a sense of urgency. Because as I said earlier, the geopolitical climate is such that everything can change within the twinkling of an eye. Because you're dealing with persons who do not seem to be stable. We have to be careful. And so I want to urge us as we continue our reflection on this appropriations bill. The figures are the figures. We have to provide money to keep these things going. But what is the ideological underpinning? What is our trajectory? What do we want to see as our nation? What do we need to see as the nation of Barbados in the 21st century as we deal with the polar shift in geopolitics that has taken place in our world. And as I said in another place, sir, societies and structures are like a game of Jenga, for those who ever played that game, Jenga, where you have to take out a block and keep building. You take out the wrong block, and everything falls apart. And I fear that the wrong block is being touched right now. And Barbados must position itself to be resilient within. We have to position ourselves to be a cohesive society. We must also encourage our CARICOM neighbors to do the same. United we stand, divided we fall. And so, sir, I implore us all, not only as members of Parliament, but to all within the hearing of my voice, to hear the prophet Haggai speaking to us as he spoke to the community in Judah of his time. Give careful thought to your ways. You have planted much, harvested little. You eat, but you never have enough. You drink, but never have your fill. You put on clothes, but are not warm. You earn wages, only to put them in a purse with holes. Is that us? I thank you very much, sir.
Thank you very much, Reverend Cannon and Dr. Rogers. Senator the Honorable Jonathan Reid.
Thank you, Mr. President, for recognizing me. Clearly, I'm nervous first time around, no? Thank you, Mr. President, for recognizing me. Greetings to you. Greetings to all in my earshot. First, I want to thank the Prime Minister for the trust she vested in me taking up this role. Those who know me know that I've been working with her very closely for the last 7 years. Work that's been rewarding, extremely difficult, and work that I could look back on fondly and apply so much of these learnings to the work that I'm now endeavoring to do. I want to thank my family, my wife Amanda, my daughter Zeta, and baby daughter Nayo, who have been strong in support and are allowing me to give up so much time and energy away from the family towards doing this work. I carry a regret that my father, Irvin Reid, an economist and former advisor to the St. Lucian government on CSME, and my mother, Adeline Reid, a former hospitality lecturer at Port Marine, aren't alive to be here with me today, but I rise with them in my heart and them on my mind. I want to thank, importantly, the people who are been part of the teams that I've got to lead, build, and work with over the last 7 years. From the teams at the Reclaiming Atlantic Destiny program, from the teams at Future Barbados, Supernova Labs, LifeStrand, Future City, and especially my teammates at the Prime Minister's office. At the end of the day, and after all this talk, the work is the work. The work is not going to do itself. I thank you for letting me push you all, and you're pushing me. I want to thank my colleagues in Cabinet, and I want to thank my colleagues in Senate who have all warmly welcomed me, many of whom I've assisted and worked with in the past. We are now at a different stage of our relationship, and I'm very much looking forward to collaborating in the future. I really do want to thank my new teammates at the Ministry of Innovation, Industry, Science and Technology for the warm and encouraging welcome. From Ms. Neblett, who's the custodian of the 4th floor, to my permanent secretary, Claudette Hope Greenwich, to my CEOs, board chairs, and various team leads. I hope we continue as we started, with care, with urgency, and ambition. I have a lot of plans for the ministry. I see MISS as the ministry of the future, as the ministry of possibilities. We are the bridge that connects today to tomorrow. We are the engine to shape and build an equitable, prosperous, modern, and values-driven Barbados. Our work influences all of government, all of industry, and all of society. This is an awesome responsibility. I'm completely confident that we have everything it takes to be the best performing and most dynamic entity in this country, public or private. I'm going after all my competitive ministries. They're coming for y'all. That's my 24-month goal. However, before we sprint, we must first learn to walk and walk well. From March to September, our focus is becoming a ministry that embodies positive collaboration and efficient delivery. We must first be collaborative and efficient with each other before we can be collaborative and efficient with the wider public and the private sectors. I'm very clear on the work in my mind. We must be and will be an exceptional service ministry. We are of service to others. We must and will be a ministry that drives up the level of public resilience and safety, especially in the digital front. We must and will build out the future economy of Barbados. And we must and will uplift the national scientific and technological capacity of this country. None of this will be fully realized if we don't build a ministry that teams don't enjoy working in, however. We will work hard, we'll push boundaries, we'll deliver for Barbados, but we must also take care of ourselves and each other. My Permanent Secretary and I have already begun planning ways to strengthen our internal culture, more social activities, more brainstorming sessions, more internal fun competitions, more shared meals, more collective well-being initiatives. A high-performing team is a happy and engaged team, and I intend for us to be both. Because at the end of the day, what is the point of governments or innovation or of technology? They don't serve themselves. They are in the service of improving and advancing life. As Mark Hill popularized the saying, Barbados is life, we must become masters of the life economy and all that entails. Before I get a little further, and I also want to do a couple of acknowledgements. I want to acknowledge Minister Kay McConney, the first BLP Minister of MIS, who was always gracious and welcoming to me and my ideas from day one. She invited me to be part of the work of the ministry and was doing a really strong job in building out the national posture around innovation and science and technology. I want to thank her. I wish to thank and acknowledge Minister Davidson Ishmael, who was collaborative and allowed him to share with him the amazing technologies I had the fortune to see in some places, like Rwanda. He collaborated and ideated on the development of the Gulf Tech Agency, which I now have the pleasure of leading and expanding, and of course, his delivery of the modern national identification system. Thank you. I wish to acknowledge the immediate past minister, Marcia Cadell, from her assistance in the building out of her constituency manifesto as far back as 2008, to the many introductions to global contacts to aid her ministerial work. Minister Cadell at the time, Marcia was probably one of the persons I worked most closely with over a period of time. We are not where we need to be in terms of how far we need to go for better understanding of cyber technology and digital public safety, but under her leadership, we are much further than we were a year ago. So I want to thank her for the work that she's done and wish her all the very best. Finally, I wish to acknowledge Dr. Crystal Haynes. I didn't work closely with her on any project specifically, but every time I engaged with her, she was just classy and gracious, quick to compliment, quick to share. I appreciate what she brought to public space in the form of her dedication to key philanthropic projects such as the Lady Box project, which I think was pragmatic and fantastic, to be honest. I really did appreciate what she brought to the space, to be honest, older male-dominated space that sometimes can feel, well, a little boring. You do that as well, Senator. So I appreciate her perspective, I appreciate her style, I appreciate her passion, and I wish her and her family all the very best. Mr. President, the blunt reality of politics, like economics, are both sciences that revel in winners and losers. The entire construct is built on the power of scarcity. In politics, there's a limit of space and someone must lose for someone to win. The entire doctrine holds true as well to economics. It's my favorite social science, maybe because, as I said, my father was an economist, and I've read and reread the work of Adam Smith, my personal hero, Sir Arthur Lewis, Friedman, John Maynard Keynes. More recently, I've been really liking the work of Paul Romer and my good friend and Barbados' advisor, Mariana Mazzucato. I love all of them, but scarcity is a common theme of their work. Mr. President, I don't subscribe to the philosophy of scarcity. Rather, I'm from the school of Benjamin Zander and the art of possibilities. I deeply and unrepentantly believe in abundance and a universe of possibilities. We are surrounded by water, and as such, there's so much we can physically see. Added to the fact that as a direct result of the vile system of plantation slavery, us, the descendants of enslaved, have been hardwired to have an inferiority complex that is so deeply encoded in our DNA that after 60 years of independence and 2 years of being a republic, we are only now scratching the surface of the repair that we must do. Mr. President, the type of insularity, bigotry, racism, xenophobia that is unfortunately too commonly displayed, and all the manifestations of inferiority complex which I speak, a complex of lack. Perhaps this complex has slowed us down in our target of economic diversification and growth, Mr. President. However, the thing that I'm here most to do and most driven by is the action of creating things that are new, to create new opportunities for new people. Mr. President, I deeply connect with the demographic that Senator Boyce spoke to yesterday, the tens of thousands of young Barbadian professionals. Chronologically, I'm no longer one of them. I'm slightly outside the bracket now. I still claim them as mine, though. Anyone who knows me that knows that I'm all advancement of the young and the advancement of the new. I deeply believe in my heart of hearts, the fastest way to break and eradicate the inferiority complex is a fundamental mind shift away from a state of scarcity to a mindset of abundance and prosperity. Mr. President, when we unlock the mindset of abundance and possibilities, we start to realize that every single textbook in Barbados has been wrong. Barbados isn't 166 square miles. Barbados is 70,354 square miles. We're not a small ocean state. We're not a small island state, pardon. We're a large ocean state. The space that we own on this planet is larger than Holland, larger than Austria, larger than Switzerland, larger than Florida, larger than New York. When we unlock the mindset of abundance and possibilities, we realize that the census doesn't count this as a disservice. We aren't 270,000 people. We have the direct access of the ideas, the skill, the capital, the networks, the time of nearly 3.5 million people. The 270,000 Bajans that live here, the tens of thousands who live here who aren't nationals, the approximately 1 million who are first and third generation Bajans in the diaspora, and of course the nearly 2 million visitors who visit us annually for a day or more. That's our actual population. That's actually the team that we have. In preparing for this presentation, I read a little bit widely, and I stumbled on this beautifully written perspective from an African business executive that went like this. I stumbled upon it, to be honest. Gratitude is not just an emotion, it's a strategy. To truly appreciate what you have to protect it, to refine it, and multiply it. The moment you start taking your gifts for granted, you begin to see opportunities where others see nothing. This is the unseen wealth that surrounds you. Skills honed over the years, relationships carefully built, knowledge gathered through experience, and assets many would envy. Yet, familiarity has a way of dulling appreciation. What was once an achievement becomes routine. What was once felt like a privilege begins to feel like an entitlement. And so, without realizing it, you take it for granted. History is filled with those who lost everything because they assumed what they had would always be there. Athletes who thought their talent alone would keep them at the top. Leaders who believed that their influence was permanent. Innovators who stopped innovating. The world does not reward complacency. The world does not reward complacency. It rewards those who recognize the advantages and uses them wisely. Mr. President, if I'm being honest, it was a moment in life where I badly struggled with this mindset of gratitude. And this is why this passage resonated so much with me, quite frankly. I've been a hustling entrepreneur for 10 years. I ran a design firm, the company was doing well. The notion of getting a job when I was in my early 30s or my late 20s was so foreign to me. But the pleasure of serving the government and having a job during COVID, I woke up every day so grateful that there was a good government trying to do good by people, and it had the ability to receive a salary for the good work I was doing. That it taught me what gratitude truly meant. And I want to offer an opportunity for more people to feel that. Mr. President, when I started out in 2018 as Innovation Advisor to the Prime Minister, I would come up with all these bright ideas for global partnerships. I would hustle all these introductions with global executives. I'd get on the phone and I said, okay, that sounds great, but where's Barbados again? And at some point in time in my pitch, no matter what the topic was, I would always find a way to talk about Rihanna. We talk about energy and figure out a way to talk about Rihanna. Just that so they had something to connect with. Mr. President, 2018, and we gloss over it a little bit. 2018 was poop water in the streets, junk-rated economy, and nobody knowing our name. That's who we were, Mr. President, just 7 years ago. The world does not reward complacency. That's why, Mr. President, even though I hear and understand Senator Boyce's point about letting all views contend in a vibrant democracy, and I agree, I still have a very difficult time rationalizing all this anti-investment and anti-global talk. I like that Senator Walters isn't afraid to talk about billions. I understand that sometimes large numbers intimidate people. It doesn't intimidate him, which is good. But adding up the billions, Senator Walters seemed not to understand that the fundamentals of how a small state economy actually works and grows. There's an incredibly good blog, and I invite him to look at it, and others, to be honest, everyone should look at it, by the founder of Bridgewater, which is the largest asset management company in the world. It's on YouTube, so if you like videos, you could watch it. If you like to read, you could go on his blog and read it. And it does a great job of explaining some complicated things like short-term debt, long-term debt, productivity, and more. You know, everyone should check it out. But in the meantime, I want to explain some simple terms, and so we can be clear. At the crux of it, an economy is the sum of transactions. That's what it is. People buy and people sell, right? And a transaction consists of two parts. You have a buyer who's giving money, and a seller who's offering a good, a service, a financial asset. It gets more complicated, but that's the square root, really, all right? And so let's bring it down to basic terminology. If someone is buying and selling a Suzuki Swift, if someone opens a cook shop and sells food, if someone opens a store in town, where Barbadians using Barbadian currency buy clothes to wear to a party, go with their friends and drive the same Suzuki Swift, that's someone was selling earlier, that's fantastic economic activity. But in practical terms, it actually doesn't grow the economy. Now, economic activity is important and needs to be encouraged, and the dollar should circulate. But in talk about economic growth, it does not increase national revenue. And there needs to be an understanding of the distinction, right, between the two. So in really simple terms, I mean, this is very, very basic terms, there's two ways the economy actually grows, right? Money not originating from Barbados comes to Barbados and stays in Barbados, right? Two ways that happens typically, foreign direct investment or credit. Simple. The other way is that goods and services and products and ideas that Barbados makes are sold outside of Barbados for more than it costs Barbados to make them. That's how the economy grows. Really, really two simple things when you break it all down, right? So in simple terms, outside money comes inside. I don't have any other way to frame it than that. Okay? Part of the outside money coming inside, again, is credit. And I get it. Credit and debt is scary. I personally try not to, had a hard time when I was younger, grappling with this idea of personal debt and all those types of different things, right? It's so scary, people don't want to get involved in it because of mismanagement. But it's become scary to the public recently because, it had a government for 10 years who didn't understand debt, who mismanaged debt, who mismanaged credit. And I get that. But it needs to be a general upliftment of the understanding of the topic, certainly in this chamber, and then hopefully resonates to the wider public. And let me share how I think about it. Again, I'm trying to be straightforward and simple. You grow the economy by really two kind of breakdowns, long-term approaches. One, you have on one hand, in the short term, credit and external investment, and then of course, increase of productivity. Productivity is a long-term game. It takes a while, right? You have a growth cycle over it, and it happens over a longer period of time. What you can do in immediacy is around short-term credit and short-term investment, right? It's really as simple as that. And if you think about how do you manage that credit and that investment, there are good ways to do it and there's bad ways to do it. So if a fisherman borrows $1,000 to go buy my friend Pug and buy 2 pairs of Jordans in Roebuck Street, it's completely different from borrowing $1,000 to do boat repairs. Completely different use of the funds. So this boogeyman around credit and debt is really a matter of management. It's not a fear that if you borrow something for the purpose of adding new value, you actually increasing your level of productivity. It is completely different to borrow at a low interest rate to build a school from borrowing from your own reserves to pay wages. Completely different scenario. I would urge that if you're interested in doing better for Barbados, not just winning your little verbal spats, I would urge you to do the work, to learn the intricacies of the fundamentals of a good society, to learn how the economy actually works. I would urge you to, as Senator Boyce was saying yesterday, do the actual work in the workings of the margins, to see for yourself. And there are amazing tools at your disposal. You know, you don't have to go far. You have ChatGPT on your phone, I assume, that you could have said for yourself, okay, I saw $38 billion spent over 7 years at a certain margin of debt incurred for that $38 billion. Let me do a comparative analysis to countries that I have high regard for. United States, Germany, Singapore, Switzerland, Canada. And if you did that, you would realize that Barbados's money, actual money in the economy, to debt ratio is on par with the best of the best. It's on par with Switzerland, it's on par with Singapore, it's on par with Sweden, it's the same. 66% of debt to 34% of money. You can do it for yourself. I'll share it with you if you want, but you can do it for yourself as well. So when you talk about $38 billion in 7 years, you call the big numbers, but it's almost like you're frightened for the big numbers as well, because that's the actual cost of running Barbados. You know, that's it. So if you do want to take up a role in the government, as you say you do, and we'll see, that's the cost of actually running this country properly. That I understand that your party left, you know, the country in a state of pop-downedness, absolute abject pop-downedness. And so big numbers are not what you're accustomed to. I get it, I understand. But if I was you, I would spend my energy and time thinking about the ways that government could be the Barbados could be in a position to not only spend $38 billion in 7 years, but $38 billion a year. That should be the goal. That's what I'm here to do. How do we take it to a whole other level? Mr. President, I understand that Barbadians are deeply patriotic. I understand that, of course, this is a very, very good thing. I'm also intimately understand how easy it is to be previous incarnations of the Democratic Labour Party mistook insularity for patriotism. It's a difference. I still don't want them to resort to that again. Mr. President, I would hazard a guess and say, I don't know, I wrote down 99%, but it might be 99.9% of all activity that this island needed or needs is imported in some way or the other. Everything around us, every single component, from the fibers in Senator Cummings' amazing dress to the amazing varnish on this wood, everything is imported. Not a single item of food that becomes part and parcel of our daily lives, from the chicken that we like to eat, the pork, the sweet potatoes, the breadfruit, the mangoes, the squash, not the religions that we practice here on the island. All of those things are imported. The people were imported, right? So the relationship that we have with importation and the world needs to very much bear that in mind. You are an island. That's why this talk of not wanting officials to travel and not wanting Barbados to be this dynamic global presence truly makes no sense to me. I cannot understand it. It is mind-boggling. Because how are we going to grow the economy if the furthest we travel is with my friend Senator Nichols to Pori Springs, or go Rodondo with my friend, Senator Blackman. How are you going to grow? How are you going to get money from outside inside if you just say inside? It's mind-boggling. It's precisely because you are small, you have an obligation to be incredibly active outside of Barbados. The world doesn't come to you when you're small. You constantly have to go to it to be doing business with it. That is the game. What is the point of all the counting of the numbers yesterday if we didn't talk about the 10x return on investment from the Cricket World Cup? I know that was Senator Walter's sweet spot for a while, but he made no commentary yesterday when he saw the report, which is odd. What is the point of being all up in arms about the conversion of what now is a completely derelict property in Jennings Lane, where you have a global entity? What did you say that the balance was? $23 billion in assets? So large, successful, 22? 32, whoa, even better. $32 billion in assets, skills, technologies, people, goodwill, saying that they want to spend hundreds of millions of dollars to set up a regional hub, 100-room hotel, conference center, exhibit space, retail spaces, parking, all the range of different things. And your investment has to be a derelict piece of land? That sounds like return on investment to me. What is the economic impact of it? The thousands of jobs you're going to create. Yeah? And then more further, thinking about multiples of return on pieces of land that exist, that are dormant. Centers that are now used for the purpose of services that could happen further inland. That you convert centers that have local activity to spaces that have high earning global potential, where more jobs and more investment can be unlocked. What's the game you're playing? You want to play a game of stagnation and complacency, or you want to play the game of growth and prosperity? Mr. President, I'm confused by a lot of the conversations, and I get that different perspectives must collide, I get it. But if you are speaking, Mr. President, about economic growth and propulsion, then you have to be honest. The numbers don't lie. The numbers are the numbers. Mr. President, as I laid out earlier, I'm really driven by the idea of diversification of our economy. I want to take a bold entrepreneurial approach to how we do state investment and management. But however, even while you do new, you have to show up what exists, Mr. President. Barbados is good at tourism. It's done it well. It has served it well. Now, the reality is we can do it better, and we want to do it better. We control our pens, we control our minds, we control our product. We can choose the type of tourism we want and the type of person we want to visit our house. We do it all the time. We control our rules, we control our values, and we control the price. I think we need to have an honest conversation about it, and I look forward to us doing such. But the reality is, we need more investments, not less. We need more world-class infrastructure, not less. We need more jobs and more opportunities, not less. And we need more growth, not less growth. Mr. President, 8 years ago, like so many Barbadians, I became deeply distressed about the state of the country. I felt so deeply compelled to contribute. When I became Innovation Advisor to the Prime Minister, through her good graces, I was allowed to co-create a program we call Future Barbados, an innovative think tank designed to develop, implement disruptive and forward-thinking program concepts, policies, and platforms that drive Barbadian national transformation by sustainably maximizing our highest value assets, which for me, and will always be, our people, our spaces, our ideas, our geography, and our friendships. In just 4 years, we've done well. Leading executives and with globally renowned entities, Stanford, NVIDIA, KPMG, XPRIZE, Google, you name it, They come to us not to sell to us, but to learn, to partner, to build, to add value together. Mr. President, when I became Chief of Staff to the Prime Minister, I set myself a personal quiet goal that I would directly be responsible for creating 500 new jobs. I'm happy to say at my last count, the number was nearly 700. Future Barbados created more than 120. The Reclaiming Our Atlantic Destiny project created more than 120. We brought international design firms and agencies here that created 20 work opportunities, really, really high paying, quite frankly. I should have stuck to my old role for some time. For young designers, graphic designers, content producers doing well here. We brought video game testing companies that have hundreds of new jobs created for young Barbadians. We created hundreds of construction jobs between what we're doing at the Digitization Center and what we're doing at the Memorial in Newton. The creation of new opportunities in new areas for new people is the work that we're doing. Mr. President, the defining characteristic of small and prosperous states is that they must decide to do difficult things for the world. When you look at the numbers, and I could share it, of states that truly do well despite their small size, they're in the business of creating high-value products that solve global problems. From Singapore to Israel to Malta to Sweden, these states register incredibly high on IP registration per capita. They become global hubs for research and development. Mr. President, that's what we want this country to be. We want to build out a knowledge economy that converts the incredible capacity of Barbadians into knowledge products and knowledge services that the world will purchase at the highest value. Mr. President, the American economist John Maynard Keynes once famously opined, the important thing for government is not to do things which individuals are already doing and not do them a little bit better or worse, but to do those things that are present not being done at all. Mr. President, I've set myself, my ministry, my teammate, my partners, a bold challenge, and I'm going to be so bold as to make it public. Over the next 5 years, the Ministry of Innovation, Industry, Science and Technology has to be the catalyst for creating 2,500 new high-quality jobs for young Barbadians and grow the economy into a 20 billion plus economy. That's the work. We have 4 main pillars that we think about this, how we get there. One, I mentioned it before, but I'll go a little bit more detail. The government, we have to become the government's premier service ministry, competent and collaborative. We have some core agencies which will do so, which will deeply resource, upskill their importance, and drive the work they do further. One, we live in a digital world with analog systems. It's the truth. So many paper-based records, the lawyers among us yesterday spoke about this in great detail, that need to be digitized. We've started doing some work in this regard, and that needs to be completely turbocharged. So we set a bold mandate of creating a new division that's focused specifically on digitization and do so at scale in a position to put us to a space where we become a data-driven and insights-driven country. That work has to be turbocharged, and it will be. 2, we have an efficiency unit within the ministry, and they're the team that go in, figure out what are the processes that exist, what are the laws that already exist, what are the procedures, how can you streamline those things to make them faster, what can you eradicate. They're the ones that did some of the work initially around the police certificate of character, Mr. President. But their work needs to be scaled. The government has hundreds, if not thousands, of processes that in many ways bear no relevance to how people want to live their lives, right? We need to be moved from a state of thinking about, quite frankly, Senator, ease of doing business to pleasure of doing business. We want to make it that easy for people to do what they want to do and how they want to do it. And that can't happen if we don't go through the process of streamlining the work of the government. One of the interesting agencies under the ministry that I must admit at first I didn't quite understand how to handle, but having an incredible conversation with its CEO, Hayden Ryan, the Barbados National Standards Institute, and the chair, I got so excited by the potential of it that if you say you want to be a world-class country, then world-class is a standard. World-class has a measure. So I said to him, what would it look like what's the highest standard of operations? He says, ISO 9001. I said, okay. So if the goal is to have an ISO 9001 country, because that's your highest standard, that's world-class, you need an ISO 9001 government. Now, before we get there, why don't we start for ISO 9001 ministry? So I set him a challenge and his team of preparing a plan where the ministry becomes an ISO 9001 certified ministry in everything it does. Response services, quality of advice, product delivery, infrastructure management, the whole 9 yards. We create the blueprint under which world-class looks like for a government, and then we share it with all the colleagues and we share it with the country. We become a lab for what that means. And you don't have much time to do it. I gave him 100 days. Finally, and critically under this idea of service ministry, is the GovTech agency. I'm very excited by it. I think there needs to be an honesty of, there's the rapid pace of global skills in the technological space that are mind-blowing. You spend a week out of reading the technology blogs and you miss so much more developments in large language models and AI and all those range of different things. It's going at a frightening pace. And to have an entity that is nimble enough to get the skills on demand that it may need, wherever it may connect those skills with, at a price that is competitive, to deliver high quality value services, I think is an extraordinary opportunity to really catapult Barbados forward. Yeah. There's an opportunity, I believe, to drive a level of innovation that Barbados hasn't experienced before in short order. And I'm looking forward to working with the GovTech team to execute it on that. The second pillar towards this large-scale growth and jobs opportunities, in my mind, is really a focus on public digital resilience and public safety. Cybersecurity is a big word, and we get nervous by it because we're all affected by it. Just recently, prior to this role, I got this very random email and I had to call an expert to help me through. We're all susceptible to it. But the reality is that we're not going back. We all have our tablets, we all have our iPads, we all have our Amazon devices in our house, we all have a phone and connection to advanced technologies. That puts us at risk. And because we're small, we have a particular level of vulnerability because we don't have at our disposal large amounts of the skill sets that we need to be able to protect us. That's the reality. Unless we shift the reality. Unless we think of ourselves not just as the skills that we have on island, but think of ourselves as a global hub for public digital resilience. What if we crowded in the best technologists, the best cyber experts on the planet to operate and reside from here? That they build their software from here, they establish their logistics hubs from here, they set up their schools from here, and from here, we service the rest of the region and the world. That's our plan. We are going to invest heavily in the creation of a command center. We're going to invest heavily in the creation of a response team unit. We're going to let opinions contend and figure out the best path towards securing our borders and securing our people. But we'll do so to optimize the opportunity to get return on our investment by converting these skills into an opportunity for services to the world. We are going to turn digital resilience into a business. The ministry has under it a wide variety of areas of interest, and this, in the interest of time, I'm going to speed through some. Telecommunications, massive. The Prime Minister, or rather the Minister of Finance, who did a fantastic job in preparing the budget, already spoke to the idea, to the plan to roll out 5G technology in Barbados, starting from this year. Our whole relationship with identity has to evolve. Our whole framework around digital trust has to evolve. So the work started with the National Identification System has to evolve and go even further. As does our relationship with data. I agree with Senator Boyce that the work and the resources of the Data Commission needs to be significantly enhanced and advanced. We started a conversation and we need to go a lot further. And how do we leverage data not only to protect our citizens ourselves, but leverage it to grow our economy? Advanced economies are driven by insight. Insight comes from individual data. Individual data needs to be protected, but it has to be done so in a way that leverages opportunities to allow our economy to grow, our businesses to grow, and for Barbados to be more competitive globally. That's the game. That's the balance we have to play. We have to convert issues and fears that we have to be areas of strength. We have to convert the gap that we currently observe by crowding in technologies and skills to build out this notion of resilient industries. Mr. President, the future economy is the part that I'm probably most excited about. I mean, it'll come to no surprise to anyone who knows me. But as we build out the future economy, we also have to advance what is. We have existing and established, and in many ways a good industrial sector. But we have to fully become in the business of exports. We have no choice. We have to renew and scale the Barbados manufacturing sector, creating competitive and export-oriented industries, delivering double-digit volume growth per annum over the next 5 years. That has to be the goal. I particularly have 3 areas of strong interest I think that we need to focus on. One of which being the nutrition and food processing industry. We are good at that area. We produce jams, jellies, pepper sauces. We know what we do. Chicken. But we have to become world-class at it. And we need to become good at it, not just for the purpose of exporting, but exporting in a way that earns so much capital that we are able to significantly and positively impact driving down the local cost of it. There's a balance that we can play with managing the rules around WTO's regulations, that we have to learn how to thread that needle, but we can do it because the direct impact on the cost of these goods, as well as the benefit to us from a health perspective, is so significant that it's worth the effort. Secondly, Prime Minister talks about it quite a lot, Mr. President, being a global logistics hub. The geographical location of our island is perfect, and that's why we were a base for the British Royal Navy. We need to leverage that fact that because everything is imported, the planes with their cargo sheds leave largely empty. The ships, when they bring their goods to us, they leave largely empty. We have a logistics arbitrage that we could take advantage of, if we position ourselves as a global hub, or at least a regional hub, for key goods and services. That work has started, and that work needs to advance. Finally, Mr. President, rum industry. We invented rum. We did it. The goal has to be to significantly increase in the levels of exports in rum. And discussions are on the way regarding rum GIs and other strategies. The goal of the ministry, in collaboration with other ministries, would be to bring all players to the table, have strong but cordial relations and conversations, and create a strong plan of driving forward Barbados' exports in this critical area. The last area of deep interest really is around, and it's Senator Blackman's former pet area, over the idea of the knowledge economy. And our vision to transform Barbados into a premier hub for innovation, digital business and services for the Global South. A hub for digital financial services, a magnet for top global talent, a center where amazing technology thrives and can be deployed, and a champion for inclusive, sustainable growth. We have a vision for Barbados to become a hub of hubs. Our R&D epicenter, and you've seen some of these initiatives already launched through biomedics and other key partners. But over the next 100 days, the ministry is going to launch 7 more such labs. One, a lab in partnership with the University of the West Indies to create an advanced artificial intelligence and mathematics lab that helps and works with the ministry to solve difficult computation and analytical problems. 2, a design industry lab in partnership with Sir David Ajay and his firm to create an industrial school lab. Thirdly, and one of particular interest to me, Mr. President, is a cricket lab. Now, not cricket lab how it sounds, but bear with me just a little bit, let me explain. We didn't invent cricket like we did with rum, but we certainly mastered it and took it to a whole new level. We hosted 3 World Cup finals. When the ICC names its top 11 world for all time, 2 of them were Barbadians. Marco Marshall, and of course the incomparable national hero, Sir Gary Sobers. Today, I don't know any endeavor that creates more global wealth for young Black Barbadian men and women than cricket. Cricket is, in many ways, our tech industry. Thus, in partnering with the Royals Cricket Group to position Barbados as their global hub for science and technology and research, we'll create a lab where scientists and technologists build on all components of sports, whether it's nutrition or hydration science or sleep science. We had an incredible conversation yesterday with a prominent female cricketer who was talking about females' health related to sports. Never thought of it before. How do you build a space where experimentation, new discoveries, data, new technologies and products can be launched on top of a platform that the world already knows, which is Barbados Cricket, offering new products and services and job opportunities to new markets. In addition to this, we're going to launch an Island Impact Innovation Lab with KPMG. One of the difficult things about my previous role, Mr. President, is you'd be inundated with all types of proposals, all types of ideas, and many of which, to streamline those ideas, I would always ask, why did you choose Barbados? Why here? And we became really good in the office of drilling down. Why would someone choose to work in Barbados? Do you align with our values? Do you see people the way we see people? And that's some of the core questions that we ask these global partners. Do you really believe in the values that we believe in? And in KPMG, the relationship started with one of the global partners who runs their ESG service. And he deeply shared the values that we have of propelling humanity forward, using technology, using investment. And together with him, we put together a team that focuses on finding amazing investment for amazing technologists, bring them in here, and leveraging Barbados as a platform for where these things can be deployed, invested in, and then scaled to the world, to the benefit of Barbados, as a stakeholder and an owner in the long-term opportunity. I listened to Senator Boyce yesterday talking about investment opportunities, unlocking all the capital that may lie relatively dormant on bank accounts and credit union accounts. And these type of platforms then will unearth huge opportunities for investment at scale in Barbadian capital and taking advantage, and truly then thinking about the government, the state, as a tool for entrepreneurship and investment. We're going to spend a lot of time over the last 2-3 years nurturing very strong relationships with, Mr. President, one of the technology epicenters of the world in Silicon Valley. We were able to, as I discussed earlier, forge strong relationships with the largest firms on the technological side, but we were able to form very strong relationships with firms on the investment side. There's a very prominent venture capital firm that we'll present shortly that is advanced on the setting up of a very specific Barbados-based fund for health tech innovation and investment. We are truly excited by it because it's a convergence of a unique opportunity and unique asset that Barbados has and hasn't fully tapped into, Mr. President, which is the fact is that we produce a large number of young scientists every single year. The University of the West Indies, Cable Campus, pumps out hundreds of young people with biology, biochem, all types of degrees. There needs to be an industry that can octave these services to leverage that to advantage, to service and grow the industry of the world. So we'll create platforms that do exactly that. The work has already started, as many of you all will be aware, with the Life Sciences Hub that's going up at Newton. There's more that we will be doing, and I'm truly excited by it. The last one I want to talk a little bit more about is the idea of a digital economy lab. The reality is that our economy has to become digitally enabled, and the Minister of Finance spoke to it. cashless, frictionless economy. As I mentioned before, going beyond the idea of ease of doing business and really thinking about the pleasure of doing business. We are a space that we're good at financial regulations. We like to say no to things. We like to be cautious. How can we use that caution and that ability to be good regulators to our advantage? How can we become best in the world of it? I have an ambition to develop an international digital economy hub from which leading global entities can come for the best advice, the best regulation, and a safe market to deploy into. Mr. President, I did connect to Senator Rogers' contribution and his call for a central ideology. I do differ with him, though. I must say I didn't love the use of the language of the other side. I don't think there's any other side. I think it's one team. I think Barbados has to be about the all. Barbados is life for all. I think we have to think of all of nation resilience, all of nation well-being, all of nation prosperity, and all of nation joy. I think Barbados must be a space where we think, we cultivate, and we manifest joy. Too much of the time we speak about squabbling over difficult things. When the work is the work to drive a quality of life forward for all, to the benefit of all. And that's the work that my ministry and I commit to as long as I'm in this role. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Reid. Senator Paris.
Thank you, Mr. President, for recognizing me. I am indeed honored today to be given the opportunity to make a contribution in this debate. In supporting this appropriation bill, I'd like to take the opportunity to thank all Barbadians for staying the course with the Barbados Labour Party in 2018 and 2022. Despite facing some challenges like the ashfall, a freak storm, Hurricane Elsa, COVID-19, and more recently, Hurricane Beryl, through it all, we were able, I do not listen to asides. Through it all, we were able to navigate these challenges, and much was achieved that benefited citizens of this great country. Mr. President, I would like to start my presentation today with the Transport Board. In these estimates, provision is made for the purchase of 30 electric buses, and they will be arriving in Barbados in May 2015 from the People's Republic, 2025, from the People's Republic of China. But Mr. President, it does not stop there. An agreement in principle was made to procure an additional 31 electric buses, and they will be arriving in Barbados in December 31st, 2025. Mr. President, when we add these electric buses to what we already have, it will increase the fleet of electric buses to 120, the largest fleet in the Caribbean. Yes. And this is something we should all be proud of. Mr. President, we are also going to be working at increasing the number of TAP vehicles to a maximum of 200. And this will give us a total of 320 vehicles that will be made available to the commuters of Barbados. With this increase in public transport, commuters will now get around this country faster. Mr. President, I was made aware, and this is something that I'm very concerned about, that TAP drivers are constantly leaving pensioners at bus stops. Some of these drivers, when they stop at a bus stop and they see pensioners waiting to board the bus, they say to them, "No pensioners today." Mr. President, this is something that I'm appealing to cab drivers who are guilty of doing it, to desist from doing it. Most of these pensioners have made a significant contribution to the development of this country and have toiled long and hard. The top drivers are not being paid by the pensioners as they enter the bus, but when they make a claim to the transport board for the number of pensioners they have on board, they are being paid by the transport board. These elderly persons are our nation builders and should be respected. May 2018, when we became the government of Barbados, at the Transport Board, there were 43, and I repeat, 43 buses providing transport from Pike Corner in St. Lucie to Bayfield in St. Philip. Now we would understand, and those 43 buses, those were provided under a Democratic Labour Party government. Now you would understand why persons had to wait long in the bus terminals and at the bus stops. Those of you who follow the calling programs and social media would have heard the cries of the commuters who were standing for long periods to catch a bus. In 2018, when the Democratic Labour Party was in power. Mr. President, this problem was addressed when the first fleet of electric buses came to Barbados that were ordered by the Barbados Labour Party as soon as it came into power. However, I would not stand here and say that we are not having challenges, but where we are having, what challenges we are having pales in comparison to when we had the 43 buses. And we brought the buses in August 2020. It was one of the first things that this government did. Mr. President, we have come a long way. Thanks to a caring BLP government and complaints on the calling program, quite contrary to what Senator Walters said yesterday, and I follow the calling programs because it's part of my job. I follow social media, and we have seen the complaints reduced drastically. Sir, the increase in the fleet by December 2025 is timely and would address any challenges commuters might be presently experiencing. Mr. President, the installation of hardware for the cashless system, something that we were all calling for, something that is necessary at this time, has been completed. And pensioners have started to use their ID cards to tap and board transport board buses. We are pensioners with all ID cards. We are enrolling them so that they can tap to use the buses as well. Students from 2 secondary schools in Barbados received their cards, and it is expected that the full move to the cashless system will be completed by the first quarter of the new financial year. Continue to take note, Senator Walters. Mr. President, I see the implementation of the cashless system as a step in the right direction at this time. No longer would commuters have to worry to get the bus fare to be able to get on the bus. They can top up the cards and travel. It will accept pensioners and cards. So this cashless system provides a safer operating environment. I was told that presently some operators of the privately owned vehicles have stopped working late because they are fearful of being robbed. We know the operators have to protect themselves, but when they stop working early, they have to give consideration to the fact that there's still persons who want to get out of Bridgetown, who want to get home. So the cashless system would eliminate this for the persons who are left stranded after hours. Something that this government believes in, transparency and accountability, and this cashless system is going to provide that. No longer would persons have to walk with cash, transparency and accountability. And it does not stop there, Mr. President. A mobile app. We travel all over the world and we know when buses are coming, and a mobile app will be created that will allow commuters to use their mobile devices to determine when the next bus will be coming on a particular route and where it is presently. This app will be created to allow persons to plan their business properly. Mr. President, we've all welcomed this new app. You would say it was long in coming, but I do believe that nothing happens before the time. I'd like to take the opportunity to thank the management and staff of the Transport Board for working on and beyond the call of duty to ensure that the cashless system was implemented in a timely manner. Mr. President, I now turn my attention to the Ministry of People Empowerment. And this ministry continues to deliver to the people of this country who are in need. And the minister and his staff must be commended for their hard work as they seek to make a difference in the lives of people. The Community Elder Care Program has made and continues to make a significant contribution to the health and welfare of those persons who have contributed mightily to this country, to the building up of this country. As of January 31st, 2025, there were 867 persons who were enrolled in this program. This number fluctuates from month to month and has reached a maximum of 965 during the past year. Mr. President, the success of this very important social development initiative is seen in the number of seniors whose physical and emotional well-being has shown very pleasing levels within weeks of their enrollment into this program. Caregivers, companions, along with their supervisors, benefited from training through the National Training Initiative during the last year. Plans are in place for continuous training during this coming financial year. Caring for our elderly and vulnerable persons is not a simple undertaking, since it requires patience, understanding, and skills. The caregivers are making every effort to ensure that the people under their care are cared for and they do everything to make them comfortable. Mr. President, I am a fan of Q in the Community, which is hosted by the Caribbean Broadcasting Corporation every week. This queue in the community is attended by persons from the older demographic. It allows them to go to queue, interact with their friends, showcase their beauty because they are all well dressed. It shows the culture, history, and stories across Barbados. Mr. President, I was happy to see the Elder Affairs program hosting its first queue in the community in February 2025 on what would have been the 80th birthday of Bob Marley. The queue was dubbed Irie Queue, and persons were dressed in their Irie colors. I enjoyed seeing them doing the line dance and dancing the oldie goldies, Mr. President, last Thursday, the queue was at Content in St. Thomas, and it was a regathering queue. The persons attending, the seniors attending, received haircuts, they had pedicures, manicures, and all of this was sponsored by the Ministry of People Empowerment. Mr. President, the regathering queue in Content was according to the young people birth. It had lots of people and it was a regathering event. Patrons were made up of locals and visitors. Some of the visitors were persons who came in to be part of the queue in St. Thomas. And I noticed the vendors were selling, plying their trade, they were selling food, fish cakes, chicken wings, and selling their drinks, slushies, and popcorn. They were very busy. These are all small businesses who are benefiting from the regathering queue.
Yes.
And from the regathering queue, Mr. President, I am sure, like me, you are familiar with queue in the community, and I can attest to watching the seniors having themselves a good time. At the regathering event in Archers Bay that was well attended, and it was a good event, the vendors were sold out very early. Some of them, I believe, underestimated the crowd, and the same thing happened at Spike Town Alive, the regathering event. I went into one of the many restaurants that was open at the Spike Town Alive around 4:30. When I went in, the waitress handed me the menu, and I called for 2 items. She said, "We are out of that. We are out of this, we are out of this, we are out of this." I said to her, to make it easier for both of us, tell me what you have. She said to me, let me first apologize to you because we were very, very busy at this restaurant here today. We had lots of patrons coming through. This was at Spike Town Alive, a regathering event. It was well attended. I personally can attest to Josephines, who have been calling me since November last year, asking for the regathering calendar for St. Joseph. Why they're calling? Because they were making plans, and some of them are coming home to be part of the regathering event in St. Joseph. It is clear that people are not listening to them. They are coming out and supporting the regathering events. Mr. President, the One Family program of the Ministry of People Empowerment and Elder Affairs was launched in October 2023. Excuse me. This program is aimed at reducing poverty and empowering the lives of 1,000 vulnerable families across Barbados through a comprehensive social inclusion capacity building. This program moves beyond welfare assistance. Recently, I was part of an organization who hosted children and their parents from the One Family program at an event. Mr. President, the children were not identified. They're fitting they were there. They were not identified as being part of the One Family program. I was so happy when I saw the smiles on the faces of these children as they enjoyed the event while interacting with other children who were in attendance. They participated fully and showed their appreciation. Mr. President, when they were leaving the event, they thanked members of the organization for inviting them. And they said how they enjoyed themselves and what foods they liked and what foods they enjoyed and how much of this they had. It was a joy to be there with them. I was touched, though, by the thank you that they gave when they were leaving. The organization pledged to invite them to other events. And I do believe that more organizations and families should embrace and include these children from this program at events. What stood out for me was the interaction between the children and the social workers and how they cared for them, they looked out for them. It was evident that the children trusted the social workers. Mr. President, I am looking forward to the amalgamation of the various departments of the Ministry of People Empowerment to the Social Empowerment Agency. With this amalgamation, I trust that persons going to the welfare department would benefit from a faster response time. I am receiving or have received several complaints, genuine ones, from persons who go to the welfare department for assistance, and the wait time is far, far too long. To someone who is in need, desperately in need of assistance, a day is a very long time. So I am looking forward to the amalgamation of these various departments so that persons who are in need can benefit. The Barbados Trust Fund Limited is near and dear to my heart. I watched the development of this department for the past 6 years, and I'm pleased to see the significant contribution it has made to the ordinary man in the street. The Democratic Labour Party went all over Barbados maligning this department. And why? I don't know. This department has helped several people to establish successful businesses. Mr. President, the Trust Fund Limited has successfully capitalized $27.8 million to support economic development across various sectors in this country. It has made significant impact in vital sectors. Agriculture, 677. Culture and creative industries, 189 persons have benefited. Manufacturing, 507. Retail and distribution, 1,529. Services like the health, nail techs, barbers, stuff, to 2,237. Tourism, 43, and that is the list, to name a few. Mr. President, various persons receiving these loans in the various sectors might otherwise be excluded for funding from established financial institutions. It should be noted that 58% of the loans dispersed by the trust fund were to female entrepreneurs, and I think this is commendable. Last week, 2 of these females who benefited from loans from the trust fund to start their business have already called me to say that they are going to be purchasing duty-free commercial stoves. They're going to be purchasing the stoves, that commercial stoves, and they're going to get duty-free on that. They thank the BLP government for allowing them to benefit from this duty-free concession that would enhance their businesses. Mr. President, one of them spoke glowingly about the new loans management system, which allows her to receive loans and to apply for loans and receive loan funds online. She said she can sit in the comfort of her living room in her own time and conduct business for her loans and to get her loan funds online. The Barbados Trust Funds Limited should be commended for this state-of-the-art system. Mr. President, a cooperative was formed by the Barbados Trust Fund in April 2023 for some of its clients. It was established with 13 people and 10 businesses. Space is rented to members and non-members. The cooperative has access to storefront at Haman's Market that sells only Bajan manufactured products. The Emerging Entrepreneurs Broad Street Mall that was held in the heart of Bridgetown last year brought together 50 entrepreneurs representing a wide range of sectors, including retail, manufacturing, food, and beverage. Participants were drawn from key entrepreneurial organizations. This was a groundbreaking initiative that spotlighted the talent, creativity, and resilience of small businesses in Barbados. Mr. President, the minister and her team at the Barbados Trust Loan Funds are giving Barbadians opportunities, and I think that is commendable. Mr. President, for those persons inquiring about the financial statements of the Trust Loan Funds, they went to a political meeting somewhere in St. Michael Central, and they asked for, when are we going to hear about the Trust Loan Fund financial statements? I want to stand here today and say to them, and that financial statements for 2018 to 2021 are completed. The financial statements for 2022 and 2023 will be completed by the first quarter of 2025 to 2026. And financial statements for 2024 should be completed by quarter 4 of the financial year 2025 to 26. Mr. President, through you to Senator Walters, it will not be a case of the Transport Board under a DLP government that failed to produce financial statements for 7 years prior to 2018. The Transport Board is currently up to date with their financials. Are currently up to date with their financials 2016, when a Democratic Labour Party government was still in power, still in the Public Accounts Committee, we're waiting to hear about that, and that's when the Public Accounts Committee meeting should be convened so that we can hear about Transport Board prior to the Barbados Labour Party coming to office. 2016 to 2019, the financial statements were completed in 2019 by a BLP government. Audited statements for 2020, 2021, 2023 were completed. 2024 is being worked on, is in the stages of completion. This type of accountability was unheard of under a Democratic Labour Party government. Mr. President, very often we hear a lot of negative comments about the Queen Elizabeth Hospital, like comments made by Senator Walters yesterday. Today, I would like to highlight this institution in a positive way. For 8 weeks, I visited the Queen Elizabeth Hospital every day. And from my first visit, I was surprised by the cleanliness of the plant and the professional manner in which the staff conducted themselves. You passed them on the corridor, they said, good afternoon, good morning, they spoke to you, that type of thing. In any organization, we have a few bad apples, but the good outweighs the bad. Mr. President, today, I would like to use this opportunity to commend the doctors, nurses, and other staff of Ward B8 for their patient care for every patient on that ward. I saw them going on and beyond the call of duty. They did not say, it is 3 o'clock and I have to go home. They worked to make sure that the patients were comfortable. They did everything. They interacted with the relatives, and every patient was treated in the same manner. I observe it, and I'm speaking to it firsthand. The Queen Elizabeth Hospital, like other hospitals across the world, have issues. So chastise them when it is warranted and give them credit when it is due. Mr. President, I would have thought that when Senator Walters made his contribution on the Queen Elizabeth Hospital yesterday, that he would have used the time to plead with family members who have relatives at the hospital who have been discharged to go and bring them home. The reason why that person was still in the casualty is probably that they did not have a bed to put them in. Beds that are being used by patients who have been discharged. I know of someone who was in the hospital last year, August. They've been discharged and they're still there. So they are using the bed, they are being cared for by the nurses because we cannot refuse them patient care. We cannot refuse it. So I would have thought that that time would have been used to plead to those persons. Mr. President, I am confident that the Minister of Health and his team at the Queen Elizabeth Hospital would continue to do what they can do to resolve any issues confronting this institution at this time. But I would want to say that it came a long, long way. Mr. President, since coming to office in May 2018, and having to bring this country from the brink of disaster, although we face several challenges that I highlighted earlier, we have several successes. and I would just like to highlight a few so Senator Waters can continue to write. We increased all categories for cash grants, and this is at the Welfare Department, by 40%. We removed the ceiling on monthly water and electricity payments inclusive of arrears. It increased the rental payments inclusive of arrears for families. Welfare Department increased burial assistance to allow for the payment of a modest casket of up to $3,000. Payment of educational assistance to families, that was changed from LPO to check. Mr. Chairman, other than the Welfare Department, this government had several successes, and I would name them. Constructed a new accident and emergency wing in the hospital with phase 3 nearing completion. Built a new geriatric hospital. This new hospital, when completed, will deliver to senior citizens and make them comfortable in their golden years. The purchase of a full fleet, and replenish the garbage trucks. A minimum of 45 garbage trucks have been purchased. When we came into office, we did not have the requisite amount to service this island. A new fire station was built in the Bridgetown port that augments the service to those on the western side of Bridgetown. Saving, and I'm going to say this slowly, saving the Barbados dollar from being devalued. That is what this government, one of the things this government did. Fixing the sewage on the south coast and the Bridgetown sewage system. Built reservoirs, solving water woes for residents living in the eastern parts of Barbados. Don't let us forget the water woes and the problems that the people in St. Joseph and St. John experienced under a Democratic Labour Party government. Don't let us forget it. We refurbished fish markets at Tank Bay, Paynes Bay, Weston, Pal Bay, and Spikestown. We refurbished the Fairchild Street Market. We removed garbage from all over Barbados. Increased the non-contributory pensions from $155 per fortnight to $225. We started back the reverse tax credit of $1,300 for those earning less than $18,000 annually. We created the Household Mitigation Unit, giving a monthly stipend to vulnerable families. Mr. President, the Prime Minister and her hard-working team, since coming to office in 2018, did a very good job at repairing the damage done during the last decade. Lots of work had to be done to restore investor confidence in this country after the mismanagement by a Democratic Labour Party government. Mr. President, they like talking. Let them talk for 5 hours, 10 hours, 15 hours. Let them talk. Let them walk up and down Bridgetown window shopping. When I say window shopping, because when they came out of Bridgetown, just as they went in with their handbags, they came back out. This is the photo. They did not buy an orange. They did not buy butter beans. I didn't see a shopping bag. Nothing of the sort were in their hands.
I hear some plunge went missing.
But yet they claim that things are so hard for the people of this country and could not buy 6 oranges from the market that they went to. What a shame.
I I hear some plunges was missing.
Mr. President, what I would like to say to them is etched in the memory of Barbadians is the pain and suffering they endured under a Democratic Labour Party for 10 years, from 2008 to 2018. The pain inflicted by the Democratic Labour Party when they were in office. Thankfully, they elected the Barbados Labour Party to rescue them, and that we did. And we showed them that we are a caring government. Mr. President, in closing, the successes listed earlier are not in keeping with our manifesto promises, but are aimed at providing a better life for the people of this country. Mr. President, I am obliged to you, and I thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you very much, Senator Paris. Senator Honorable Lyndall Nurse.
Thank you, Mr. President. So we come again to our usual annual exercise of having to discuss the annual estimates of revenue and expenditure. And of course, we usually take an opportunity to have a look at what budgetary measures have been proposed. So overall, we are going to be showing or estimated for the 2025-26 year revenues totaling $3.5 billion as against expenditures of $5.1 billion. So we know there is an estimated deficit of $1.2 billion, which has to be financed. There are two ways to finance it, of course. You raise additional taxes to generate additional revenues, or you go out and you borrow some additional funds. Local borrowing, foreign borrowing, as you see fit. I can't say that I have seen in the budget this year a lot of additional tax raising measures. So obviously, this additional revenue must be expected to come from borrowing. And in the actual estimates, I know that we have estimated $1.5 billion in foreign borrowing and $0.7 billion from domestic borrowing sources. Not sure, I don't know what is via this year going through the end. We are coming to the end of our current IMF BERT 2 program. So I don't know if the plan is to have another program, a BERT 3. There isn't as I said, it's only, there isn't a lot of funds which I see that are expected to come in from IMF sources. Presumably that is the final funds for the BERT 2, which will be coming in. So where's the other foreign borrowing coming from? Looks like we're going to be relying pretty heavily on the Inter-American Development Bank this year. And with some other contributions from the Latin American thing, as well as I believe the European investment bank. I can just, if the details of those. Right. Latin American Development Bank, Exim Bank will be the other, and the World Bank looks as though they will be the other main sources of foreign financing. I don't think we are really in a position yet to go back out to market, although we have had a number of upgrades within recent times, but still our credit rating is not yet back up to investment grade. So obviously if you try to go to market, it will likely be very costly, because obviously you're going to have to pay risk premiums to be able to borrow on the market, and higher because of higher interest rates which will be required. So I don't know, we will have to wait and see and hear from government whether or not it may be prudent whether to go for another Work 3 in the coming year. In terms of the domestic financing, the funds are expected to be raised primarily from debentures and T-bills. But majority of the funds from other, and I don't know what that other source is, because it's really not spelled out in here. So that may be from domestic banking sources or other financial institutions. I don't know. But it is interesting because we had projected in the previous year to raise funds through the BOSS bonds, the BOSS Plus bonds, and that didn't seem to, anti-notes, and didn't seem to materialize. As a matter of fact, if you look at what is projected in terms of from those sources, you are projecting by the end of the year to raise 58 million in BOSS bonds and 16 million from the issuance of Series J. So that does not seem, based on this, to have been a very successful venture for raising financing. And so you have to wonder if the public has not as yet gotten back the level of confidence that they are prepared to start investing again in government securities at the levels that they would have done in previous years. So we wait and see how this works out, but it certainly is something that we have to keep in mind. We have to keep in mind as we move forward, because of the implications also for the costs, the debt borrowing costs, which can arise because of the difficulties in being able to raise funds either on the local market or on the foreign market, and because we may have to adjust the interest, the interest rates on these securities. So we wait and see what happens as we move forward into this year. I just want to touch on a few areas, Mr. President, pertaining to the estimates of revenue and expenditure themselves. And I want, in particular, to look at, first of all, the Ministry of Housing. And I do so because when we look at entities which come under the Ministry of Housing, for example, we have the National Housing Corporation, we have the Housing, we have the UDC and the RDC. Of course, just Friday last week, we debated the amalgamation of those two entities in this honorable Senate. But so we have that new entity, and we also have this HOPE project, which is out there. And I'm not going to get into any political discussion about HOPE, or I leave that for the politicians, Mr. President. But the point is, you have those three entities which are all tasked with basically doing the same kind of jobs, which is providing housing solutions for our population. But there's no clear distinction or delineation in these different entities in what they're doing, or they seem to be all doing, in some cases, the same thing. In some cases, the Ministry of Housing itself has done some projects. Like, for example, the steel project, the steel frame housing project, which was started after the hurricane, and which these steel frame structures were being imported from a Chinese company and used to establish housing for those persons who were affected by the then hurricane. But the report from the Auditor General is really not encouraging. And that report, by the way, is on the Parliament's website. So, you know, we are all free to go and check it and see. And what it has revealed is that there are several issues in terms of, you know, the management and so on in this area of housing. For example, you have a project, the same steel project, which was estimated to cost $29 million, and has now subsequently revised to be in excess of $50 million. So the cost of the project has doubled. The Auditor General has reported issues in terms of employing, in terms of employing suppliers, and in which proper due diligence has not been carried out. And all of these other issues tend to suggest to me that the time has come when we really need to begin to look at the whole management and structure of the housing situation and try to do some sort of level of rationalization. Mr. President, we are to a large extent still using a model of housing which provides for single family detached units, for example, where you go and you acquire land, or where land is acquired, subdivided, you sell off the lots, and you do individual housing units. My point is that I think the time has come, and the time has come, and I've said it before, when we have to start to look at how we utilize land or lands. And therefore, we have to look at the policy in terms of housing. We have to decide whether or not we can still continue on this single model system. I would suggest, Mr. President, that given the diversity of the housing market, that and given our scarce land resources, that we have to begin to look at things like condominium type housing. We have to look at duplexes. We have to look at high rises structures and therefore try and increase the housing density so that we efficiently, or more efficiently, I should say, utilize our scarce land resources. And they have always complemented one project which was a good example of what can be done. And that is the London-born project there in Bay Street, where high-rise structures, where we did a project with high-rise structures, and it has brought to that part of the city an improvement in terms of the overall housing in that area. And you can see that that area is now no longer in this old and to some extent dilapidated state that it was, and it has added to the improvement of the whole Bridgetown environment. I noticed that a similar thing has also been tried to some extent in White Park, where some high rises were also constructed. And again, that is a good example of the sort of things that we can do to really increase the housing density and provide good, wholesome housing for our people. I think too, the time has come perhaps as well when we have to start to go into the rundown areas, as you call them, and the government has to acquire, may have to acquire in some cases, or assist the residents in those areas in terms of renewing and rebuilding those areas so that over time we get the city of Bridgetown and other areas up to really improved level of housing. And you know, some of those areas are really in a bad way. And therefore, I think these are the type of things that we will have to do as we go forward to alleviate the housing problems. But there's also another aspect of it, because a couple of years ago, the University of the West Indies had done a study for the government when they were preparing their report on Habitat, I believe it was Habitat 2 or Habitat 3. And one of the things coming out of that study was that 1 in every 8 houses in Barbados was unoccupied. And obviously that would be for various reasons. Some of them would have been in a dilapidated state and not fit for habitation. Some of them may have family issues surrounding them, and various other reasons. But the point is that if you have 1 in 8 of your housing stock which is unoccupied, that is a significant portion of housing which, again, government could need to come up with some plan of how we can bring these houses back into use, and therefore, again, that would assist in reducing the heavy demand on taking up new lots and doing new developments, and therefore depriving perhaps the agricultural sector of scarce resources. I think that maybe the time has come for the Ministry of Housing to again have to produce some sort of white paper, a policy paper on housing, looking at all of these issues and seeing how we can move to resolve them in a holistic and sensible way. So, you know, that policy, of course, would cover things like the housing needs and demands, the types and terms of structures. It would look at things like financing. It would look at the current housing stock and supply, and see what is out there and see what are really the current demands for housing. For example, I know Senator Boyce yesterday in his presentation spoke to a lot about the young professional people who are in this middle lower income class. And for sure, it seems to me, from what I hear from persons in the construction sector and so on, that these young persons are no longer necessarily interested in these single lot units. They're quite comfortable to go and live in a condominium or an apartment complex or so, where they don't have to take care of some backyard or take care of some garden or whatever, but they want a space which they can adequately live and do the activities they are involved in, but not necessarily to have to manage that single unit space. And so these are all the things that I think that a good policy paper, properly researched, would bring out, and therefore it would be able to inform government on policy matters as they move forward in their housing, on their housing plans and their housing situations. The ministry itself, the Ministry of Housing and Lands itself, has a housing planning unit, or it had. I don't know if it still exists, but that used to do in years back, they used to do extremely good work in terms of collecting information. And they used to produce quarterly reports, which would talk about things like water connections, electricity connections, and all of those issues which we needed to be able to have information on a regular basis. I don't know if that unit is still in existence. I haven't seen any reports within recent times. But I would suggest, again, that if it's still there, it needs to be much more active and assist in producing this kind of information we need. The point is that I've spent a lot of time on this area of housing, and this is because this is a critical area. Whenever you hear about housing, you hear about the demand from the national housing, the many thousands and thousands of demands or applications which is into the National Housing Corporation for housing. So it is an issue which is critical and is an issue which we have to bring all of our resources and to use all of the sensible, we have to be able to use all of the sensible ideas we can to try to solve these problems, to generate housing solutions for our people. I just want to briefly also touch on the area of agriculture, Mr. President. And I noted with satisfaction, I talk about agriculture probably every year when I talk on the budget. And so I'm happy this year to see that there's some support for the poultry industry, because I was really worried about that industry. That was an industry which really and truly was nurtured virtually from scratch. And we had gotten to the stage where we were effectively self-sufficient in chicken and other poultry products. And then last year, it's almost as though all hell broke loose. You couldn't get eggs, you couldn't get, and the problem still seems to be some persisting to some level up to now. You couldn't get eggs and you couldn't get chickens, and you heard all of the problems which arose. Some of them were natural problems, some of them were unavoidable, some of them the market and industry have no control over. There were climate problems, issues due to heat and so on. But outside of that, there's something which went wrong. And some of the feedback which you were getting or which you were hearing through the press and from other various persons involved was that a lot of the small farmers, for example, who at one time were usually employed as contract growers for the bigger suppliers, or went out of production. And so the whole industry seemed to have come under, in recent times, a murder of issues which has affected it. And so to some extent, I am happy to see that government has, in this budget, has put is putting some funds in to try to make sure we can help to get that whole industry resuscitated. Also, I noted, and which again is obviously a very good thing, that the water rates for fresh water for the farmers has been reduced. And that is, again, a very good measure, for our farmers. And I think that these are two important points, and I commend the government in this area. While I'm on the question of water, though, Mr. President, I would also like to recognize that a few years ago in the budget, there was a tax which was added on to our water bills, which was to provide additional financing for water and sewage. And I believe part of it went to garbage collection as well. And like all of us, we gripe because it was an additional tax that we had to pay. But the fact of the matter is, Mr. President, there has been good things that has come out of the tax which has been collected, because we are no longer hearing of all of the complaints and the issues related to the supply of water, particularly in those northern parishes, which was an everyday basis. We would hear people having to complain for 2 weeks. They had no water. People complaining that they don't see a water truck, and all of the issues that were in there. And it seems as though that fund has actually been utilized to try and solve some of those issues. And if that is the case, then I think we should be happy that the taxes which were collected from us were put to good use. Of course, the brown water issue notwithstanding, we still have, of course, to deal with that issue and to put it to bed. But progress has been made, and I note that the purpose of the tax is now being extended to allow a portion, some part of that is collected to be applied to capital usage, which means we now have the opportunity to upgrade our distribution network and to use some of that funds to replace some of the mains and so on, which year after year and time after time, we hear we have a distribution system which is old, which really is in need of repair. And so I am hoping that this will be a continuing project, and that we will not have to go back to the times where we have issues in terms of these good and reliable supply of water. And especially, as I said, in those northern parishes. Mr. President, there are a few items in the budget which I just want to touch on as well. And I should say that it seems to me that this was quite a social type of budget. There are quite a number of issues which sort of address some of the niggling social issues that people have been complaining about, and they're not big ticket items. They're not items that will call for, millions and millions of dollars to inject, but things which the general population of Barbados will be happy with. But again, in terms of water, again, the fact of the matter is that, for example, being able to look forward and be now, rather than being reactive, being proactive. So for example, I now see that every plan which is now submitted for construction of a new residential property will be required to have installed a water tank. And that makes sense. That is a good measure for mitigation as we move forward. I visited when, in another life, when I worked with a firm. I visited Bermuda pretty often, and I saw what they had to do in order to be able to make sure that they have sustainable supply of water, and it worked well. Everybody had to have these as part of their construction. They had to have these tanks either on their roof or in the floor. And the same thing you saw in some of the Grenadine islands when you travel as well. So I think these sort of mitigation efforts is going to be useful, and they make sense. It's going to relieve the government of a lot of the issues which they have in terms of having to set up people with water tankers and so on, and to supply water to households. And, you know, people calling and saying, well, I see the water did off since, you know, last week, and I see a water tanker come through, and I had to go down to the next community or something with 2 5-gallon bottles or something to get a little water. So those are the type of social issues which we could solve by these sort of mitigation efforts which are being put in place. I now want to just talk about a few of these other social issues. I know, for example, Mr. President, there is projected to have a project in which $5 million is being injected for the purpose of providing podiatric care for persons over 70 years. But I think that's again, a very good project. But I would only have suggested that this project, which will obviously benefit diabetics to a large extent, because diabetics do have significant foot issues, and therefore I would have said maybe we should have included not only people diabetics over 70, which this will cover, but all diabetics. And we hear about the amputation capital of the world, and we always hear mention of Barbados in that regard. And so if we can solve a lot of these issues by having this level of care for our diabetics and for others over 70, then again, we reduce the demands on our health system, and therefore those funds could be directed into other areas of our health system. The other thing I want to say in regards of health is, Mr. President, I go to, one of my social activities now seem to be that you go to funerals.
It's depressing.
And the truth is that when you listen to those eulogies, you hear in a lot of cases dementia, the mention of dementia, and Alzheimer's, and so on. And it is obviously a real big issue in our society, as it is worldwide.
Major problems.
As it is worldwide. And I raise that for two reasons. In terms of, but more so I wanted to touch on the caregivers, which we tend to forget. And those are the people who have real problems when they have to deal with persons with dementia. Particularly if you are trying to struggle through by maintaining the sufferers in the home environment, you have the issue of, number one, you may have to bring in a nursing care, and nursing care is not cheap these days, Mr. President. You may alternatively opt to put the person into a home, but then again, that itself is very costly. I know that, for example, you're talking about fees of $3,000, $4,000 a month to be able to maintain patients in those homes. I'm saying all of that. And then, of course, we have from the side of the caregivers, the issues which they themselves have to face. It leads to additional stress for them. They can then begin to have issues with hypertension because of having to deal with these patients all the time. It has an impact on their overall social interaction and socialization, because they spend all of their time with, have to spend a large percentage of their time with these sufferers. And it's almost like a full-time job. And so there are all of these issues which then the caregiver has to struggle through. And that pressure then comes to bear. And I think that perhaps one of the areas when government is looking, or one of the areas that needs now to be considered as we look forward in our health situation, is maybe and I think if we can encourage families to keep persons with dementia within the family as long as it is still manageable, we should be encouraging that. If we can, and we have to bring in nursing care to assist with the care, I think maybe we need, the time has come here, we may need to have to look at some sort of tax credit or some other form of compensation, or I don't call it compensation, it's probably more assistance for those persons and those families who have to struggle through with these issues of dementia. And also in this area of social issues, I see that there's to be an increase, a pretty significant increase, almost double increase in the weekly allowance for foster care parents. I think that that is an important aspect of the whole issue of dealing with the issues of childcare. I think there are a number of families who have been involved for years and have done an extremely good job in assisting with looking after children who would otherwise have had to be confined or consigned or placed, or whatever is the technical term, in a home. And so I would like to see this aspect of it being expanded and encouraged, and that families be encouraged to take on the responsibility where they can of getting involved in the whole question of foster care. And so I think, again, that is a good move, and that is a step in the right direction. Mr. President, before I run out of time, and there's just one other area under the estimates themselves, dealing with the estimates themselves, which I also want to cover off on, and it is in the area of energy, Mr. President. I know that government has been making considerable efforts and strides in terms of developing the alternative energy area. I know that we have reached a stage where there is some difficulties with the PV systems which are currently being, which are currently being constructed in some cases, or PV systems where persons have done the project, but are having difficulties getting themselves connected to the light and power grid. And that is unfortunate, because and I say we now because I was encouraged by what I was hearing and so on, that it is the right way to go. And I still am convinced that it is. But it is sad when you have a situation where you have expended money and invested in a PV system, either to produce electricity for your own home or to generate some extra revenue to supplement your income. And having invested that monies, you are now in a situation where you cannot be connected to the system, and therefore no revenue is being generated. And what is more is that some people would have gone to the financial institutions and borrowed some money to be able to do the project. And so they are now stuck in a situation where you've done the project, but you can't be connected, but you still have a loan to service. And you are really in a bad situation. And I don't know how all of those issues which are on the table in relation to this PV area, but I think these issues have to be resolved quickly so that people have the confidence that really and truly we can move forward and we can continue to look to invest in this alternative energy system. And while I'm on energy, Mr. President, I know and I accept the importance of moving towards the alternative energy systems. I know it is the way to go, but I know that we, some years ago, had ventured out into looking at oil and gas production offshore. It seems as though within recent times, nothing is happening out there. And I may be wrong, but let me say that I haven't heard about anything that is happening. Now, I don't know if the government obviously has been supporting and been pushing the issues connected to climate change as well as it should. But the question is, should we not also be continuing to look at that area as a possible means of making sure that we have a diversified energy sector? And Mr. President, if you look at Guyana, for example, Guyana has benefited significantly. Guyana now has a average GDP growth rate of 9% over the last 10 years. And it's because they have now one of the big players in the world in oil production. So while, and it is interesting to note also that when you look at the USA, for example, we now have a president who is all bent on rolling back all of the mitigation issues and so on which were put in place to help help in terms of climate issues. So all of those are being rolled back. The U.S. is again going to be pulling out again of the Paris Accord. And so it seems as though the big players are also ignoring the issues related to climate change. And I'm not suggesting that the USA should be the role model that we should follow, but the point is that as a small island developing state, as a small island with a very small economy, we have to make sure that any resources we have, we utilize them to the best, in the best way that we can. And as a matter of fact, if we were to be able to get good results coming out of our oil exploration and drilling exercise, we could actually be using those funds, some of those funds as well, to help develop the alternative energy systems as well. So I don't see necessarily that one is necessarily exclusive to the other, but that we should be looking overall to see how all of our various energy resources are used to maximum effect. And so I raised that because, as I said, I haven't been hearing anything about it. So I don't know if we're moving forward, if we're moving back, if we're spinning top in mud, what is happening in that area. Mr. President, I think that covers a lot of the comments I would have wished to make in terms of the estimates and in terms of the budget. And I just want to wrap up by just talking very briefly about the Public Accounts Committee, Mr. President. I am concerned that we have a committee which is supposed to be a kind of a watchdog, or supposed to be overlooking what happens in terms of transparency and so on, and how government utilizes and spends the finances which are voted for, voted for the government in Parliament. And the Public Accounts Committee, in my mind, has a crucial role to play in that regard. It is, to my mind, a critical and a crucial committee for Parliament. And therefore, as I said, its primary function, which would be to examine the annual Auditor General reports and scrutinize how public funds have been spent. And of course, investigate any irregularities or other issues which are highlighted in the Auditor General's report. And the important thing, as far as I'm concerned as well, is to make recommendations for improvement of the systems. But we have a committee which doesn't seem to have functioned for a little while now. I don't know what the issues are. I'm not going to try to raise them because I don't know. I don't sit on the committee, so I don't know. But
Have a raise to identify that the opposition leader is the chair.
But, Mr. President, I think we need to see if it's necessary that, if they are necessary that there are problems which hinders the committee from functioning.
Yes, the chair.
I don't know if there's I don't know if there are attendance issues. I don't know if there are
Mr.
other
Chairman.
issues.
I rise on a point of order.
What's your point of order?
The honorable senator, bless him, I know he means well, but he is misleading the House. The PSC committee on which we sit, I sit on that committee, I sat on the last committee, I sit on this one. The committee, to the best of my knowledge, has not met since June 2024 because a meeting has not been called by the chairman. That is unequivocal the fact. And the chairman is the leader of the opposition. And the question of attendance, Mr. Chairman, on every occasion, and the records are there to show, the government members have been present at the meetings of the PSC.
Thank you, Senator Cummins. Please proceed, Senator Nurse.
But it doesn't seem to have been working. It doesn't seem to have been functioning. And I don't know. All I'm saying is I don't know what can be done. What can be done to cause this committee to function? What is necessary? And all I'm saying is that perhaps the time has come when Parliament has to look at the issues and do whatever is necessary to create a workable solution to seeing that this committee functions, because it has an important part to play, and I would like to see it functioning as we go forward. And therefore, Mr. President, that covers off my observations on these estimates and the budget. I hope that the various various concessions which were given will be gratefully accepted, and that they will prove to be useful and beneficial to those sectors of the society which that will be benefiting. I of course, and I should of course speak for the bar, for which I'm also a member, and I'm sure that they too would be grateful for the fact that we have moved, the government have moved from $40,000 to $50,000 in terms of the annual allowance. And that is good, because I think that for a long time, those, that group of persons, retired persons generally, have been asking for various eases, for ease in the tax and the fact that they have to pay tax. And therefore, that is going to be, that is useful for them. And I also would commend that decision to ease our retired person. And with those few words, Mr. President, I am obliged.
Thank you very much, Senator Nurse. Senator Cummins.
Mr. President, I beg to move the suspension of this sitting of the House for lunch until 2:30 p.m.
The question is that this sitting be suspended until 2:30 p.m. today. Will those honorable senators in favor please say aye? Aye. Those honorable senators against please say no. Methinks the ayes have it. This sitting is suspended until 2:30 p.m. today.